Okie dokie. So I am going live now, and hopefully I'm going live a little bit early because I just want to check my sound. Okie dokie. So okie dokie. So now then, I might have to turn my computer off. I will turn my computer off in a minute. Right, I think that sounds okay. Vicky will tell me, I'm sure. I've got a new microphone system, so I'm hoping, I'm here. We're going to be drawing the lovely dog's ear, but I'm hoping that the sound is okay today, because I know we had a few issues last week. Vicky says we're 190% on the sound, which is a really good thing to hear. We like 190%. Okay, so I'm just going to very, very quickly look at my the chat here and just make sure that everybody's happy. Sounds okay here. Sounds great. Wow, very clear sound. Oh, hurrah! As they say in the Snowdon household, who flipping rah? Yeah, we had some weird sound issues last week, and it's very frustrating. I'm just getting my glasses on now. Very frustrating for me because it's really difficult for me to work out sound for other people. But I think it was my microphone. So anyway, I've got a new microphone now. It's actually attached to my the front of me. It's right here on me, so it moves around with me, which is pretty good. So I've got my phone here with Vicky. So if there's any questions that Vicky wants me to answer from the chat, she'll send them through to me, and I'll be able to have a look at those and come back to you with an answer. Today we are going to be drawing the ear here. And it's basically all about the layering. So it's not a particularly interesting colour, but then when you're drawing things like this, pets and all of that kind of thing, when you're drawing the fur, unless you've got really vibrant oranges and reds and maybe a little bit of sort of brindle or something like that, you will find pretty much that the fur is quite sort of straightforward in that there's not a huge amount of colour in there. And so what we need to be looking at with this particular ear is the structure. And that's what I'm going to be talking you through as well as we sort of start to get into it. But the structure is really, really, really important. We want it to look like there's a big fold in it. We want it we want to be able to show this light area coming down the side. We want to show the very, very dark areas. So we're using quite a limited palette on this. It's a grey dog. It's a grey dog. I have a feeling we're going to use a little bit of pink in there. I like to use a little bit of brights in with my sort of more boring colours, because no colour is boring, but I like to use a few little brights and everything in there. So this is what we're going to do today. And then what I'm going to do with the rest of the dog, I've seen some fantastic renditions where people just couldn't stop drawing from last week, which honestly I absolutely love. You can hear the smile in my voice. I absolutely love it when people get so carried away and off they go and they're like, I just couldn't stop, which is brilliant. And I've seen some really, really amazing drawings that people have done carrying on. I am going to carry on with this one. And you will be able to find it in the Academy once I've done. What's lovely about this is that we've got all of this gorgeous grey fur, and then we get to the chest hair and the neck hair, and it's white. And that's where everybody's going to be going, I don't know what to do. There's some pinky colours in there and everything like that. So actually, the head's going to take an awful lot of work. The neck and the chest actually is not going to take a huge amount of work because we're going to be working white on white. It's got a lovely, lovely little nose in there as well. So I think it'd be a really nice portrait actually to have in the as another bit part of the tutorial for you to do. So before I carry on, the Academy membership, which is the Ignite membership, opens tomorrow at 12 noon in the UK. Very, very exciting. I've got lots and lots of excited people coming to join me, which is amazing. And if you're on the wait list, you will get an email prompting you that you can join now. You've got a couple of weeks to join. If you're not on the wait list, you can just head to my website from 12 o'clock tomorrow and you can join there as well. And there are different options for you. You can join monthly, you can join annually. And I've also got a plus part of it now as well that you can kind of add on workshops and stuff like that too if you want to do. So you can kind of get the, all of the experience, or the membership is an amazing experience anyway because it's got everything in there. Plus I've got some really exciting, I haven't had guest speakers in the academy before, and in April and May and June actually, I am having a couple of guest speakers who have been instrumental in getting me to where I am in my business. And I'm really excited about that because, whatever I learn, I pass on. So to get the people who have been helping me, coaching me, all of that kind of stuff to come in and do some sessions for my members is absolutely incredible for me. I think it's just amazing. And of course these sessions are all included in the membership. So I'm really, really excited about that. Okay, so let's get down to business. Let's get down to starting on this lovely dog's ear here. So first thing I'm going to do, it does actually look quite nice and light on the screen. What dog is it? I don't know. It's some kind of a sighthound. I think it's probably a greyhound or an Italian greyhound. I'm not really certain. It's definitely a sighthound, the long nose and everything. So it is quite light on the screen for you, but what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my kneadable eraser. So I use the Faber-Castell kneadable eraser, and I just want to dab off that top bit there because I want to get a nice soft line on the top there. I'm just going to dab a little bit around there as well. And it's always, this is the question when you're starting something like this, any new area on an animal, particularly if you work in the way that I work in sections, it's always like, oh gosh, where do I start? Do I start with light? Do I start with dark? And I think for this particular one, just to get us going, I'm going to choose the dark sepia. Anybody who knows me will be cheering now. I'm going to choose the dark sepia, which is the 175. And what we're going to do is we're just going to put some marks on the paper. I know we've done the eyes, but we're coming to a separate area now. So I'm just going to put some marks on the paper that show where our darkest areas are. Now, this is not set in stone. You don't have to follow this particular technique with every drawing that you do. It's just another way of doing something. Okay. So I'm going to actually start on this bit here because I can see two really dark areas here. Oops, let me just blow that up a little bit. So we've got like a little fold across the top there, and then we've got this little fold coming down here. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of the dark sepia in here, where that very, very dark area is here. Very light pressure, so we're talking hardly touching the surface. So I am hardly touching the surface here, okay? I've got a relatively sharp pencil, and actually I'm just going to move that glassine paper because it's a bit noisy, and then we'll just come in. Now I want you also to be really careful about how you follow your line art. If you're anything like me, your line art goes down in a matter of seconds. Literally scribble it down, and then always regret it, and I never learn my lesson. But just watch that you are following your reference photo, not just following the line art. Is really, really, really important because it's very easy to pick up on things in your line art that aren't actually correct, or you pick up on the wrong bit of a line or something like that. So you can see here, all I'm doing is I'm literally just very gently sketching in the this little dark sort of shadow, and this is just to get us started. This is just kind of warming us up, getting our fingers going, getting a mark. Now, actually, is that right? I'm thinking I've got a little bit extra there, actually. Let me just have a think about this. This is going up. This is going up here. Right, so straight away, I've missed out a hole. So what I was saying before, don't blindly jump in. That's exactly what I've done. That's exactly the sort of thing that I do. So mine is here. I did this yesterday. I'm drawing a new commission piece, and I had to just sort of dab out the eye area. Actually, that's all okay because it's quite big anyway there, isn't it? So there we go. No harm done. And actually, really, I love it when I go wrong on a piece. I honestly, I don't panic or anything, even when I'm sort of teaching live. I love it when I go wrong, especially when I'm teaching and I'm recording, because then I can show you how easy it is to put it right. Especially if we're working on pastel mat, it's so easy to put things right. Okay, so we've got this little dark area here. It's grainy. Forget about the grain. Don't even think about it. It's going to be grainy. Grainy is good when we're working on pastel mat because it means that we can get lots of layers in if we want to do. And there are lots and lots of tips and techniques that we can do to get rid of the grain as well. And then I'm just going to come in here and I'm just going to bring a little bit of sort of shading down into there as well. And this is just to get us going basically. Now I've got it feels really smooth, this piece of pastel mat, but actually when you start working on it, it is quite grainy. So we're going to use some techniques to be able to get over the graininess in there. Okay, so we've got that, which looks very odd. And then we're going to come over to the other side of the ear over here. And we're just going to bring a little tiny bit of dark around here as well. Now you can see how my technique has just slightly changed. Now I'm coming to do the edge of this ear here. What I'm doing is I'm just doing little sketchy movements so that we've got some texture in there. So it's not a big straight line, so that we can sort of see the idea of the fur and everything, you know, where it's kind of wrapping itself around the ear. So just nice, gentle, wiggly pencil marks in there. We come down to that little bit there, and then we can come a little bit into here as well. Now this is a really great bit to demonstrate actually, where we've got this paler hair coming through into the ear. And this is a question I'm asked an awful lot. How do you get lighter hair to sit over the top of dark? And a lot of the time I see people either using a slice tool or they'll try and get a white pencil over the top or something like that. For me, what I tend to do is I will sketch in the idea of the fur that's kind of coming in over the top. So I'll just very gently kind of sketch in what that hair sitting over the top of the dark is going to look like. And I'll do this for white hair, any coloured hair that's sitting over a darker background. That way you're going to get, I mean, it's not going to look identical to the photograph, but you're going to get a really nice soft effect, rather than going, oh, I'll just whack the colour in and I'll scrape it out with the slice tool afterwards. And it will look horrible. I can guarantee you it will look horrible. It will look scratchy and it won't look the same quality as the rest of your drawing. Look how easy that was. Dead easy just to you know, wriggle in a little bit of those hairs. And straight away we've got that structure of the ear in there. Right, so now what I want you to do is get your cold grey 2. So the cold grey 2 is the 231. Mine is sort of sharpish, it's kind of got a rounded end. And when we look at this photograph, another question that I'm asked an awful lot is, how do I recognise warm and cold colours, you know? And for me, it really is more about sort of very simply, one looks cold because it's bluey and one looks warmer because it's either reddy or yellowy. There's a huge amount of technical information around colour theory, but if you just want the simple, you know, when it comes to greys, that's the easiest way to recognise them. So I've got a cold grey on the bottom there, which is like a bluey colour, and I've got a warm grey on the top. These are both, this is cold grey 2 and warm grey 2. And you can see the difference there. One is quite yellowy coloured and the other one is very bluey coloured. Now, personally, I like to mix them. When you look at your photographs that you're drawing, you will find an awful lot of the time that you will have areas where it's definitely cold and it's definitely warm. So you might have a black that is looking really bluey. That's sort of like a very cold black. You'd use blues underneath your blacks. You might have a black that's really warm looking, you know, and it's got sort of like reddy glows, gingery glows in there. And then you would use sort of like a burnt sienna or a caput mortum violet underneath the black for your warm colours. This particular ear is a little bit deceiving. I'm seeing sort of quite cool colours coming down the side here and on the tip, and I'm seeing relatively warm colours on the rest of the ear. I'm actually going to start with a cold grey, and the reason I'm going to start with a cold grey too is because I can get some nice coverage, and then we can get warmer greys in over the top, and we can start to really, really work out, you know, all of that nice sort of fur and everything like that. Okay, so I'm going to take my cold grey, I'm going to use nice light pressure, and we're going to start up at the top. I'm just going to bring some little tiny sort of wafty little bits of hair in there. Any hair that sticks out over the top of anything wants to look like hair, not like pencil marks. So it's got to be nice soft pressure. And then what we're going to do is we're going to follow the fur direction. Don't worry that this isn't the right colour. We're going to layer and we're going to get all of those colours coming over the top, but we're going to follow the fur direction. Following the fur direction is absolutely key and is one of the main pillars of realism, you know, because it gives the structure of what's underneath what it is that we're drawing. Obviously with an ear, there's like cartilage, all of that kind of thing. But it's really, really, really important to get that fur going in the right direction. The other thing that's really important is to get the length of the fur, because this is a short-haired dog. If our pencil strokes are long, then the quality of the fur is going to look different. So we need those little tiny short pencil strokes, which then represent the fur. And most of the time, I quite like to get a little bit of texture in right from the beginning. You know, so just gently coming down here. You can see there's a little bit of change in direction there as well. I'm just going to come down this side. People are saying, can I move the pick down slightly? Hold on a second. Oops, that better? There we go. Hopefully that's better. And I'm just going to put that on there. Sorry, I'm just having a conversation with Vicky here. Okay. So I'm just going to come down the ear down here. So nice, gentle little fur strokes. Again, making sure that you're looking at your reference photo all of the time because fur changes direction. I've got a quick question from Vicky here as well. How do I do my line art? So for me, now what I do, I used to do it on an app and it just gave me far too much information and it was so confusing. So I create my line art on my iPad. I connect my iPad to my Mac or my laptop and I use Photoshop and I use my Apple Pencil and I create my line art digitally as a JPEG. You can use Procreate if you've got an iPad, and that's how I use it. And then I take that JPEG and I project it onto my surface. And then I do a very quick, I kind of whiz round it. I usually use sort of like a warm grey 2, something like that. If I've got a darker animal, I will use something like a brown ochre or a raw umber. The flowers that I've just done, I actually used cinnamon for quite a lot of those. It worked really nicely with the greens and the pinks. And the other thing is just to make sure when you do your line art, use very light pressure. Really, really, really light pressure. You don't want to indent the pastel mat ever. Because you will get a line and you will be so frustrated. So, you know, light pressure is very key. You know, so that you can see it, obviously. But yeah, nice light pressure. So I'm just coming down here. I'm just going to get some water. And you can see I'm just sort of gently bringing that first layer in. I'm going to go over the entire ear. So I'm seeing this as my section, my specific section that I'm working on. So I'm just going to, in these initial layers, probably work over the entire ear and then start working on smaller sections. So coming down to the bottom part of the ear here. Now, again, there are no hard and fast rules as to how you can draw. You may be someone who likes to dot around, so you kind of do a little bit here, you go down and do a little bit there. Whatever it is that you find the best way for you is the way to draw. You know, there are people who are my members, and I teach them to draw, and they don't draw in the same way as me, but they kind of utilize my techniques, and they they use them using their style of drawing. It's very, very, very important to find something that you enjoy doing. If you're doing something and it feels wrong, you're less likely to carry on drawing and being creative. So it's really, really, really important to find a style of drawing that suits you. You know, very often you'll get people sort of going, oh, I've never seen anybody draw like that before. I thought the proper way was this, that and the other. Or, oh no, you shouldn't draw like that. Nobody should ever be telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing when it comes to being creative, because there are no rules. There are techniques that you can use. There are techniques that you can, you can change and adapt, but nobody should be telling you that you're doing something wrong or you should be changing it. We've all got our different ways of drawing, and it's really, really, really important. Because otherwise you end up stopping, and we want creativity to be part of everybody's life, whatever they're doing, because it's so amazing. So I'm just going to come up onto the top here. You can see again how the hair changes direction. Now, the other thing that I'm doing here as well is I'm putting like a little tiny bit of a curve onto my pencil strokes. You can see on the photograph, it curves around. So I like to almost visualise and think about I'm drawing on top of the dog's ear. We're going to bring some of these dark colours in, which are going to help us get a really nice idea of the structure of the ear as well. But before I do, what I'm doing here is I'm just going in slightly darker with the same colour. I'm just using a few more layers. I'm not kind of bringing any details in because this dark area doesn't really have any details, and it will give us a nice opportunity to understand the structure of the fur. So it's kind of coming, we're sort of losing a little bit of the structure of the fur in there because it's going slightly blurry, but we can still kind of bring an idea of how that's coming through, and I can bring that in and around there as well. It's very soft fur, so that's another thing that we have to be thinking about. How do we create soft fur? And that is very much about how you're laying your pencil down. So you can see I'm being quite nice and fluid with my hand. My pencil strokes are very soft. In my head, I'm kind of thinking about how this dog's ear would feel. It would feel, how you sit there and you just kind of feel your dog's ears. I don't know whether I do that all the time and boot their noses. If you can kind of visualize how this fur feels, you are more likely to get the quality of the fur onto the paper with your pencil. If we were doing a wire-haired dog like a border terrier or something like that, we wouldn't be using lovely, soft, gentle pencil strokes. We would be far more kind of getting some spiky bits in, some shorter, sharper fur bits in, and again the how you use your hand and the pressure that you're using on the paper would be very different. I'm a very visual person, so I like to I've always got a vision in my head all of the time of what I'm doing, and that really, really helps me, particularly when it comes to sort of drawing fur, because it's definitely about the feel. It's definitely about how something feels. So it can look a little bit ugly to start with, when you're just sort of laying down one layer of pencil. It can be like, oh my goodness, this looks terrible. Coloured pencil is a slow medium, and that's what's wonderful about it. It's just an incredible medium to just get stuck in and become very, very mindful. So an awful lot of the time I lose hours because I'm drawing, and I just I'm in the flow. I disappear somewhere. I have no idea where I disappear, but it is almost like waking up from a trance, and it's wonderful because you forget all of the worries, everything that's going on in your life. You can forget when you're being creative and you're your drawing. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do, and that's why I try to encourage as many people as possible to be creative in whatever form, singing, dancing, whatever. Creativity is so important. So I'm just coming down again around here, looking at the fur structure down here. Now, the other thing that's really important is that don't feel you have to get every single tiny bit of fur detail into your drawing for it to look realistic. You really don't. Actually, you're far better to bring in less detail and concentrate on the tiny differences in your values, so the darks and the lights. You're going to get more realism if you concentrate on those little tiny differences than if you try and get every single tiny bit of hair, hair detail in. When we look at a dog, very seldom do we see every single bit of fur. But we do see how the light and the dark kind of interact with each other, and that's what's really important when it comes to realism. Really understanding how the light works and how you're going to get that light into your piece and how you're going to represent it. So just coming down here, just a little bit dark in there. And these sort of, we call them ugly stages, but they're not really ugly stages, are they really? It's just the stages that need an awful lot more work. And if you're trying to make something look like real fur with a hard pencil on a flat piece of paper, you're not going to get it just on one layer, unless you're amazing. It's going to take a few layers to do it, and you have to remind yourself of that. When you're sitting there going, oh my goodness, this looks terrible, oh gosh, it's terrible, just remind yourself of the fact that you've only done one layer. You've got some more colours to put in, you've got some lights and shades and everything to put in, so you've still got quite a long way to go. And I think being kind to yourself, and when you have that bit of chit chat in your head, which I think the majority of us have, it's about I always say, whenever your head's kind of giving you a little bit of grief, ask it a question. Ask it, is what you're saying true? Because the majority of the time it's not true. It's just, negative chit chat that you're, usually it's because your ego is trying to keep you safe. It's trying to stop you from making any changes. And actually, we don't want to stay in that sort of comfort zone. We want to be out there having fun. Right, okay, so we've got this one layer now in here, which looks very insipid and not particularly attractive or like fur, but that's okay because we've only just started. I now want to introduce some of the warm grey 4. So this is where we start to mix and match the warms and the cools. So you can see the difference here again. I'll show these two here. So we've got the warm grey here on this side, which is number 273, and we've got the cold grey, which is the 231. The cold grey, that's actually cold grey 2, that one is. And we're going to bring a little bit of the warm grey in on the top. We're going to go gently to begin with to work out where our darkest areas are going to be in the ear. Because if we went straight in with those really dark elements, that is going to scare the pants off us. Because it's going to look really dark against the ear, which is very light at the moment. The contrast is just going to be too big. So we're just going to build it nice and gradually. So I'm going to take my warm grey 4, and we're just going to start to bring in a little bit in over the top of the cold grey. Now again, ignore the grain. I know it's quite grainy, but just ignore it. We're gonna once we put this colour on, we're gonna get another colour, and we're gonna get rid of all of that grain. The grain is good because it means that we've got the ability to be able to get lots of nice layers in. Yes, it can be frustrating, but there are ways and means of working with it. And I would much prefer to have to be working on a surface that allows me to put layers in than a surface that doesn't. Saying that, I love drafting film, which doesn't allow for loads of layers, but and then what we're going to do is we're going to come down and we're just going to bring a little bit of this really dark shadow that's coming down the centre of the ear here. We're just going to start to bring a little bit of this in so that we get an idea of the structure of the ear. So I'm not looking at details, I'm looking at shading it in, I'm looking at just bringing this shape in. We want it to be soft, so you can see I'm using very soft pressure. I've got soft edges, so it's not just a big dark line. I'm being very, very gentle as I bring this darker element down the ear here. And I'm imagining it, anyway, I'm thinking that it's going down, so it's deeper down. This area here is deeper down than this area. Of course it needs to be darker, but because we're just sort of building up to it gradually, that's okay. And I'm just going to come down through here. And then when we come up the other side, I'm imagining the hair kind of coming and curving around. So I've got a curve that kind of comes almost like that. It's almost like a dip. And that's how I need to kind of visualise how my pencil is working. So it's almost like I'm imagining drawing a dip on my paper, and there's actually 3D. You know, there's actually a dip in the paper. You can fool your brain into thinking anything you want. I mean, we all know that. So try and fool it into thinking things that are going to really, really benefit you. You know, I think we've all had those moments. You know, when you've woken up, you've had a dream. It's like the Friends episode where Phoebe's really, really mad with Ross because she's had a dream about him. We've all had those times where we've woken up, we've had a dream, and we're like, oh my God, and then you're really angry for the rest of the day with the person that you had a dream with. And it's not true. Although subconsciously it could be true, I suppose. But it's not true. So, you know, you can trick your brain into anything, because your brain really doesn't know what's real and what's not real. So trick it into something that's going to really, really benefit you. And that is by, you know, almost tricking it into thinking that we're actually drawing on you know, not a flat surface. We're actually drawing on a 3D surface, and that can be really, really helpful actually when you're trying to draw something that's realistic. So what I'm doing now is I'm just looking at my reference photo and I'm gauging where this dark area stops. So I'm looking at the relationship of where this stops and where this little bit of the ear crosses here. So a lot of people talk about you put your line art down and it's cheating because you've traced it. And you know, people are all allowed their own opinions. However, I don't want you to think that because you've put a line art down, your whole picture is going to be perfect. You've got to do the work when you start to shade and add colour and form and everything to your picture. And you have to be able to go, okay, hang on a second, what's the relationship between this area of the ear and this one? Because I could very easily bring it down to here and then go, oh, hang on a second. You know, so actually there's this is a little bit higher up here. This then starts to come out slightly. So we've got this little bit of a bulge going on in there. So it's really important to, you know, I don't use grids or anything like that because they just confuse me. So for me, I have to kind of work out where everything is in relationship to everything else. So I like to sit back an awful lot. I have a chair. It's a Herman Miller Mirror 2 chair that I have now. It's a very good chair. And it's set to, it just follows my body. So if I sit back, I sit right back and like I'm sitting right back now. And it means I can sit back and I can really look at what I'm drawing. And I sit back an awful lot when I'm drawing, you know, to kind of get that whole bigger picture in there. For me, that's a really, really important part of my process, is to be able to see how everything fits in the bigger picture, even though I draw in sections. You know, it's really, really important for me. Okay, so I'm just going to work my way up here. And it is grainy, you know, I'm working on 2 pieces of pastel mat at the moment, this one and a new commission piece that I've started. The commission piece I've started on a piece of board that I hadn't realised I'd got, and it was in the bottom drawer of my plan chest. And I was like, ooh. And it is super, super, super smooth. You can't see any grain in it. It's a really lovely, lovely piece, but That's the thing with pastel mat. You never really know what you're going to get. The outcome's always the same. Sometimes the process in between needs to change just slightly, and it's just because of how it's manufactured, which can be frustrating for some. But I think for those who really love pastel mat, we just put up with it. So I'm just going to come through here. So we're starting to be able to see a little bit more of the structure of the ear coming through here. I'm going to upset everybody in a minute because we're going to go over the entire thing and smooth it out, and we're going to lose all of it. You'd be like, well, why on earth have we done that? And it's funny as well, a lot of people when we're drawing on pastel mat, they I get the sort of feedback that, oh, it's much slower than drawing on other surfaces, or, oh, it's much harder than drawing on other surfaces. And all it is it's just a different technique. If you're drawing on a smooth surface, you still need to get the layers in. You've got to burnish, all of that kind of thing. So each different surface that you work on will have a different quality and a slightly different technique. And if you can sort of learn the techniques to work on abrasive paper like pastel mat, film, smooth paper, you kind of got a huge amount of techniques in your toolbox there, and you'll be able to draw on any sort of surface really. And then it's up to you as to what you want to use, because some people love drafting film, some people love hot press, some people love pastel mat. It's entirely up to you what you want to use, but it's quite nice to be able to make that choice. So how do I choose what surface I want to use? An awful lot of the time the choice is made because I've been working on a particular surface. So if I've been doing a drawing and I've got another drawing to do straight after, which is usually the case, usually I would just use exactly the same surface that I have been drawing on, so it tends to be pastel mat. It changes if I'm creating a tutorial and I decide I want to specifically to show these techniques in a tutorial, so then it would be a drafting film or hot press or something like that. Your favourite surface comes into it, very much so, a preference. If you like using the slice tool, then using something like drafting film is a brilliant choice, because you can use the slice tool on drafting film beautifully, absolutely beautifully. It works amazingly. If you're quite heavy-handed, you might quite like to use hot press paper because you've got more of a burnishing ability on there, and you might prefer the hot press paper on there. So it's up to you. It's up to you. My favourite most definitely is pastel mat. Yes, there are some pieces that I get a little bit frustrated with because they are a little bit more grainier than others, but on the whole I really, really enjoy working on pastel mat. It suits my particular favourite techniques, and it's very forgiving. So if I make mistakes, then it's very easy to put it right. So, pastel mat, I would, if I had a really bad photo, like a really poor quality photo that I was working from, pastel mat would definitely be my number one choice, because I can get that more painterly quality in there. Again, if I had a very detailed, like a little, like a bird or something very small, and I wanted to get an awful lot of tiny weeny details in there, I might choose drafting film. If I was going to do something smooth, funnily enough, I would use pastel mat, because it's really tricky to get very smooth texture on drafting film. You can of course do it, and some people really specialise in that. I find it far harder to get that real smoothness on drafting film. I much prefer to do it on pastel mat. And then hot press, I would only choose to use hot press if it was a tutorial, because it's not a surface that I really love. And being sort of like a full-time artist, teaching artist, and I still do my commissions as well, I have to stay in love with what I do. I can't imagine what it must feel like if you fall out of love with what you're doing. I just can't imagine. Right, okay, so now what we're going to do is I'm just going to couple of techniques. I think I'm going to use a little bit of a cotton bud. You might have a little soft brush or something like that, or a paper stump. If you don't, you could use like a little bit of cotton, like a handkerchief or microfiber cloth or something like that. In fact, I'm not going to do it with this, but if you've got this is my glasses cleaner, you could use something like that. And I'm just going to very gently, and I mean very gently, just come in over the top of what we've done and just dab it. And we're using polychromos on the pastel mat. Polychromos are hard, dry pencils. So the pigment sits on top of the tooth. And because it's hard and dry, it's very easy to move around. If you're using a soft pencil, so if you're using Prismas, you're not going to get this same effect because your Prismas are going to stick to the tooth and the pigment is not going to move around. And that's why I use polychromos for my backgrounds. They just move around brilliantly. They're just brilliant. Same with Pablo's, hard, dry pencils. Anything that's soft like Illuminance, Light Fast, Prisma, Castle, Arteza, stuff like that, you're not going to get the same effect if you use a cotton bud because they're going to stick to the pigment. Or the pigment is going to stick to the tooth, should I say. Okay, so we've just sort of smoothed that out a little bit. So now what I want to do is I just want to come in with, I want to bring a little bit more dark into here and work a little bit up into the top here. So I'm going to use the Payne's Grey, which is 181. Again, it's sort of like a bluey colour, and I'm going to bring a mixture of this and the dark sepia in. And we're going to start up at the top here, and we're going to work between the Payne's Grey and either the Cold Grey 1, or if you have it, the light grey Pablo. Okay. And the reason that we're going to be swapping between the two is because we're going to be putting a few little bits of the darker colour in, and then we're going to be using the lighter colour to smooth and blend. So we're just going to start up at the top here, and we're just going to start to bring a little bit of the idea of fur in. And you can see we've gone back to being quite grainy. So again, it's almost like I'm drawing all of the little tiny fur lines in here. That's going to help us get the texture. And then when we blend it with the lighter colour, it's just going to soften, and some of those little details are going to disappear. So again, we've got to be really careful about which way the fur is going. Okay, and then I'm just going to come in with my light grey, Pablo light grey, and I'm just going to come in over the top. And what you'll see is, just like we did with the cotton bud, it moves the pigment around, and we can actually get a really lovely, soft fur feeling. In there. It seems a little bit counterintuitive when you're trying to get it sort of dark and then you put a really light colour over the top of it. But it works. So, yeah. So, and then we can come back in again and we can start to darken it up again. So I can start to darken, probably bring a little bit of the dark sepia in there as well, actually, but then I can start to just darken. So I'm wanting my details to be these little areas where there's slight change in value. So it goes from, sort of like a mid-tone to a darker shadow. That's what's going to give me a really nice idea as to the realism and how everything's working. So you can see now we've got a nice base. We're now starting to bring this sort of soft fur in over the top. So the base is really important because we kind of get an idea of where everything should be. And then we can come in on the top and we can start to really build those details and everything. Now I have got a few little scratches in here which I'm ignoring. If you get a scratch, very, very common to get a scratch when we're using pastel mat. And if you get a scratch, the best thing to do is just ignore it, work over it, round it, as you normally would. And as you build your details up and build your layers up, you'll find that it will just start to disappear. If you try and get rid of it as soon as it appears, the likelihood is that you'll start to use harder pressure, you'll start to try and fill it in, you'll start to try and, you know, draw in the line and all of that kind of thing. And actually you can make it so much worse by doing that. So just a case of pretending it's not there. Okay, so I'm going to darken this little area up here again. We need to bring some black in to get this really, really nice and dark. Again, I like to go in sort of relatively gently, you know, so it's not too much of a shock. And we're just going to come over the top of the ear here. You can see my pencil strokes are short and they're backwards and forwards, and the pressure is very soft. And we come to the edge of the ear here. And you can see we start to change colour again a little bit. So we've got this darker element coming through here. Again with the pastel mat, you know, if you kind of put some layers in and you think, oh heck, I need that to be lighter. Simple, you just go over with a lighter pencil and it goes lighter. It's such a forgiving surface to work on. I think people, do you know, I do think some people do like to concentrate on the stuff that goes wrong rather than the stuff that goes right. I'm one of those people that just, you know, if something goes wrong, I'll try and find something that's, you know, gone right. You know, if something happens, I will try and find some kind of a positive. It makes it far easier for me to kind of, you know, live. I think I am a very positive person, but you know, I'm always trying to find a positive stance to things. Okay, so this is looking quite nice on the top here. So I'm going to come back in again with that light grey, the Pablo light grey. We're just going to bring a little bit on the top here. So just gently, very gentle pressure. We don't need to burnish or use hard pressure or anything like that. And it will just very nicely just skip over the top of what you've done and smooth it out. Obviously, the grainier your piece of pastel mat, the more you're going to have to work your layers like this, light over dark, light over dark, light over dark. You know, so you probably will end up with more layers than somebody who's got a very smooth piece of pastel mat. But what you'll find with someone who's got a very smooth piece of pastel mat, when you start to blend your colours, it can go a little bit smeary. So there's pros and cons for smoother pastel mat and you know, the more grainy pastel mat. Okay, so I'm just going to come in and we're just going to go a little bit darker in here. Let's just try and get this nice fold in the ear here. So slightly more pressure as we just build. What tends to happen when you're drawing stuff like this is that you'll draw shapes and they won't really look like they're supposed to look until you've got a little bit of context around it. And it can then just be like one line that can have the effect of everything then starting to take shape, and it's like, oh, it's working now, it's looking like it should. And I think it's important to understand that context, building context around what you're trying to do is key. You know, so if you've got an area and you're thinking, I know this is correct, I know the shapes are correct, but it's just not looking like it should, then my suggestion is to stop doing what you're doing and just work a bit around the area that you're working on, bring a little bit of context in, and then it should all come together. So I'm just going to swap to the dark sepia. It's going to give me a darker colour in here. And we're just going to go little round circles in there. I'm going to bring a little bit more of the dark sepia in here. It is quite slow. You know, an ear like this this is sort of like a 10 by 12, maybe a little bit bigger than a 10 by 12 portrait. It can take a while to do, you know, and it's just one of those things that that's how it is. And that's what's nice about it as well. I like it. So don't worry if we're coming in and you're thinking, oh, it's too dark, because we're going to bring those lighter colours in over the top, and we're going to bring the warm grey 2 in. And this is what I was talking about before, how we can just mix and match the warms and the cools. Don't worry if it's looking a little bit blocky as well, because it will all come together once we've got these layers and everything in there. So it's you know, if you're thinking mine's looking terrible, you know, again, it's because we're just layering at the moment. So just coming through there, just nice and gently. You'll also find that some of your pencils feel different, and it's due to their different pigments. You know, so you might get one colour that feels quite sort of soft and creamy, and you might find others that sort of feel quite scratchy. It's all down to the pigments that you use to make the colours. I think all of the Polychromos pencils and the Faber-Castell product, I think they're all vegan as well. So I'm not sure about the other manufacturers, but the Polychromos are all vegan. So we're just working down here again. Now we are going to lighten this area up here. So I have got some like funny little lines in here, which, you know, again, I'm just ignoring. Another question that I'm asked quite a lot is, how on earth do you draw a nice sharp line on pastel mat? Because when you put your line down, it's like, it looks like you're drawing it with like a 10-foot poker, you know, in the initial layers. And the thing about drawing a nice sharp line on pastel mat is you've just got to get your layers in. You know, use light over dark, all of that shenanigans, and then you'll be able to get your nice sharp line in there. Sometimes, if you've got a nice smooth piece, you'll get a nice sharp line in relatively quickly. You know, but it's about understanding how the surface works so that you don't feel frustrated. I think it's like anything, getting to know something really, really well is a good idea, because then you'll kind of know its quirks, you'll know what to do in certain circumstances, and when it comes to drawing and colour pencils, it's definitely the case, you know, understanding your different materials. Okay, so I'm just going to keep coming down here. Still looking, I'm quite glad this is quite a grainy piece actually. Well, inside I'm dying, but but I am quite glad this is a grainy piece, because I can then show you, you know, that it isn't a problem, and you know, you can get over it very, very easily, and it is just all in that layering process. I think you can even hear it on how grainy it is. But, I started a little Clumber Spaniel last night. It's a full body, which is quite nice. So it's the first time I haven't been recording anything for quite a while, actually. Well, I'm saying quite a while, probably a week. So it's always nice when I'm not recording anything, because I can listen to Harry Potter. It was quite good. Okay, so coming around that again, the edge of this ear, again, really, really important that we get the sort of structure right, because it's got that nice sort of soft, fat lip on the edge of the ear there. Okay, I'm just this is the dark sepia I'm still using here, and we're just this is where I start to get a bit bored. And you know, my lovely, nice, gentle, short pencil strokes become a little bit more sort of erratic. But that's just me, and I have to sort of, you know, talk myself down and tell myself to slow down, you know. But again, we need to be really looking at where we're wanting to bring some of these highlighty areas in, and we're getting to a point now where actually we're getting a good few layers in, and the ear is now starting to take shape. So So we can use our putty eraser as well to bring some like more highlighty bits in. You know, so if you've lost an area and you think, oh, that I just need that to be a little bit lighter, you can just sort of pop your putty eraser on and just lift the pencil a touch. For me, I tend to use the polychromos as my initial layers, just because of how they move around on the surface, and also because they're very easily lifted if I do make a mistake and I just want to kind of lift them out. So I can lift them out with, you know, my putty eraser, or I can lift them out with something like Scotch tape. You know, really, really useful piece of kit. This is Scotch tape here. Really useful piece of kit, because you can just kind of peel a little bit off, whack it on wherever you are, and just, you know. Oh, Vicky's put here, does humidity affect paper or pencils? I would suggest that yes, it probably does. So pastel mat has it's prone to bending, just because of particularly the board, just because of the moisture content between the backing and the surface. So I think if you've got somewhere that has, you know, sort of particularly high humidity, I think that could sort of become, it's not an issue, but you might see it happen more often. And not sure about humidity, but I know that temperature will also play a part on your pencils. It will make them a little bit softer, you know, if it's very, very warm. So I think it's just a case of sort of, you know, being sensible, I guess, with what you're doing. Okay, so we're just coming in there. Right, so I'm going to come in with the warm grey 2. And we're just going to work in over the top. So we're just going to come in over the top here and just soften everything again. This is quite a short pencil. But again, very, very gentle pressure. And we're now going to start to see some soft fur coming through. So I'm not using hard pressure here at all. I'm not burnishing. I'm using the same pressure that I was using for the other layers. And you can see how the fur is now all starting to look a lot softer and actually look like fur, rather than this sort of grainy mess that we've got on the other side. So just nice, gentle. Again, we're going to go a little bit more, much darker in there, but we're now bringing this up to the correct value as well. And you know, I know when I first started drawing, you know, and it was all about the eyes and the details and you know, I just wanted to draw things with eyes and, you know, horses with bridles, because I wanted to get in on the detail, and anything that got like a lot of fur in it, I was like, oh my goodness, you know, the neck area on this dog would be like, oh, I just can't. You know, you'd have your mind on your next drawing, and you'd kind of sort of completely lose interest in the one that you're drawing as soon as all of the details are gone. And I had to train myself to love every single part of what it is that I'm doing. And I think now it's not necessarily about the subject, you know, and the details, it's the process. So it's the whole process of being creative, the whole process of pencil to paper, the whole process of me being in my studio, of having, I'm very strange. I only listen to Harry Potter when and it's the book, not the films. I do like the films, but I far prefer the books. And it's Stephen Fry narrating Harry Potter. That's all I listen to when I draw. It's bizarre. And I think it's because it means that I can literally, you know, zone out completely, disappear somewhere, come back an hour later, you know, and know exactly what's happening in the book. I haven't missed anything. I don't feel I have to concentrate on what I'm listening to. It's almost like a little bit of white noise in the background. And that again is very much part of my process. So it's for me, it's the whole experience of drawing is what I absolutely love. And I've never fallen out of love with drawing ever. I've never not wanted to draw. There are times where I've been too tired and I've been like, oh, you know, right, okay, it's not right for me to draw tonight because I am so tired. But, you know, I've never sort of sat there and gone, I don't know what to draw, I can't draw, I don't want to draw, never. And I think that's because I love the process so much, and I love how the process makes me feel. You know, I know for a fact that I can be in a right old grumpy mood on a Tuesday and almost, you know, almost sort of say to Vicky, I'm just gonna cancel everything today. And I think I've only cancelled art club maybe twice. I think one because I didn't have any electricity, and another time I can't remember what the other time was. But you know, an awful lot of the time I'll get to like 10 minutes before and I'll be like, oh gosh. And then as soon as I sit down, as soon as I start drawing, my mood lifts and I'm a completely different person, because the process of being creative and drawing has it just changes everything. It just makes me feel completely different. You know, so, and I have to remember that. I have to remind myself how brilliant drawing makes me feel. And the same with teaching. I love teaching live. I absolutely love teaching live. It's a different experience teaching live to teaching to creating a tutorial. Even though when I create my tutorials, I do the live voiceover. So I sit here and I talk through what I'm doing as I'm doing it. I don't then go over and edit it in. But it's definitely a different experience when you're drawing live. You know, I don't know why. I think probably because you know that you've got a time limit, perhaps, which is, you know, quite useful. But okay, so we're starting to get some nice fur details in here now. It's starting to look a little bit softer. We're getting some, you know, some good values in here. We need to get this dark bit in here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to take that light grey, or you can take your cold grey one, and I'm just going to bring this colder grey, this cooler grey, just down here into the bottom. Now, as you work through the layers, your first layers are going to be really light and gentle. Really light and gentle. As you work through the layers, your pressure needs to just increase slightly. Not so that you're like, you know, hammering on the paper, but just enough so that you're getting the pigment pushed into the tooth. So you shouldn't ever feel your wrist is aching. If you feel your wrist is aching, then you're using too hard a pressure. And you shouldn't ever be making indents in the surface. That means that you're using, your pressure is too hard. But we do need a little bit more pressure as you're working through the layers, so that we can kind of get everything sort of squished in, so that not everything is sitting on the surface all of the time. So I'm just going to bring a little bit of that light grey in there, and then I'm going to use my putty eraser in a minute, and just there's a little sort of vein area that I'm going to pull in down here, just using the putty eraser. So again, just coming in here, just adding more layers. Nothing stopping you using your paintbrush or your cotton bud. You know, use it as much as you like. Try not to be too heavy-handed. Paintbrush, if you use a little soft brush, you will find that it brushes the pigment off quite easily, so you have to be quite careful to use very light pressure if you're going to be using a paintbrush. Okay, so I'm just going to come down there, and then we're going to get the black out, and we're just going to start to bring in some more of that detail in there. Get some really nice idea of what that detail is going to be like. Okay, so I'm going to get my black, put all of this lot back. And we're going to start to come in here, and we're going to really start to bring in this dark area. So light pressure, nice light pressure. We're just going to come in over the top, and what we want to do is we want to make it like a smudgy shadow. So like I said before, we don't ever want to have these dark areas where they're just a big dark blob. They've got to make sense. They've got to work with the rest of the piece. They've got to look like it's a dip in the ear, not a marking. And that is going to come from your how you're laying your pencil down. So is there a curve on it? What are the shadows like, the graduation from the dark through into the rest of the ear here that's light? And it can take a little bit of work. You know, you might start to put it in and it doesn't work properly, and then you might have to just keep layering. It's this kind of thing that we're doing now where pastel mat comes into its own, because you can layer and layer and layer and layer and layer. And it's these tricky areas where you've got to get the shaping just right, the values just right, everything just right. And being able to kind of add multiple layers, that's where the layering really, really comes into its own with pastel mat. You know, I would say on a general piece that's not too grainy, my layering is probably going to be, I don't know, maybe there'll be places where there's just 1 or 2 layers. There's going to be places where maybe there's, 10 layers, something like that. It's very rare for me to put a huge amount of layers in, but there's always sometimes where it's a little bit more complicated, and that's where, I'm like, phew, thank goodness I can get like 50 layers in, and keep sort of going. If you've made like a big mistake or something like that, it's you can just sort of layer in over the top and incorporate it, which is awesome. So again, I'm just going to come up. So it is quite dark this ear as well. I think we think of this as being quite a pale grey dog, but actually there are places where it is quite dark. And I like to use black. I know, some artists are like, no, mustn't ever use black, use your colours and everything, which is, absolutely fine. And I would also always say, bring a colour in under your black. But the polychromos black is great because it's slightly more translucent. So it means that you can see through the layers. So you can actually see these little layers of colour coming through underneath it. Whereas if you use a brand that's highly opaque, you're going to kind of lose a little bit of the colours and the layers underneath it, because it's just going to kind of obliterate it really. So I'm just going to come down here slightly. This is where I'm going to bring that little lighter ridge in there, where we've got almost like a little bit of vein coming through. It's still quite sketchy. My style is quite sketchy. Obviously I end up with something that looks relatively real, but I like the sketchiness of my pencils because I think it gives things a little bit more life. If you've got movement in your fur, it gives it life, and that's what I like. We're all different, and all teaching artists are different as well. They kind of pull out different things, and a lot of it is down to personality. How we. I find it very hard to actually sort of dictate what goes down on the paper. It is just something that happens for me. And there are areas, obviously, where I want to develop it, and that's fine. I can kind of develop certain areas, but. When you see these debates about, what on earth is the point in realism, you might as well just take a photograph. You probably got a point. But for me, when I put pencil to paper, I don't have a choice. This is what happens. I didn't purposefully make a decision to draw realistically. It's literally what happened. And I really, really enjoy the process. So for me, it's about the process, and it's what it makes me happy, and it makes my life happy. And I think that is brilliant. There was a post in a Facebook group last week, and it was basically that, why are you doing it? What is the point? You might as well just take a photo. And it's such an odd thing to say, because art is very personal, and we do it for all sorts of different reasons. But I would say the majority of the time, for everybody, the reason that you do art is because you really enjoy it. So for somebody to come along and say, what's the point? It's like, do you not want people to be happy? I just find it really weird. You know, so. Right, okay, so we've got this nice little light bit down here. It still needs to be slightly darker, but can you see how we're really starting to build up this, the values, the dark and the light. And can you see how if we'd started with this dark area, it would have been quite scary to start with this dark area. You know, to get it the correct value would have been right from the beginning. We'd have just had a big black blob in there and it would have been far more scary. And that's why I like to just do things a little bit slower and just gradually bring the value up there. I'm just coming down through here. Gently, gently. So again, you can see my pencils, I'm going backwards and forwards, just getting in some nice sort of gentle little fur lines in there. We've got this darker area coming down here. Still taking notice of the fur lines in there. Very, very important to take note of the fur lines. Coming in. Oops, under there. Again, you might find that what pencil you've drawn your line art with, you might find that it's showing through. So when you bring your darker colour in over the top, it might show through. Again, the best thing to do is try to ignore it. Don't try sort of, you know, using hard pressure to colour over the top of it, because it will probably make it worse. So it will eventually disappear. Unless you've used too hard pressure. If you've used too hard pressure, it's you know, it is a little bit tricky, but hopefully with a little bit of sort of cotton bud, maybe a little bit of paintbrush, something like that, you should be able to kind of get rid of it. Just going down there. Gently again, just using the black in there. Just to get these slightly darker. I'll bring a lighter colour in over the top as well, but just to get these little darker elements in. Okay. Oops. Yeah, so I've got my this Clumber Spaniel that I'm going to be finishing, and then I'm going to be starting. I want to finish this piece, and then starting the next big tutorial, which is a human portrait, which is quite exciting. There's going to be flowers in it and grass. So if you want to learn to draw grass, I'm going to be putting that in it. So it's and I'm gonna try and like really take my time, you know, and kind of work slowly through it. I mean, I never tend to rush anything, but I can work quite quickly. But I think particularly with the grass. You know, just making sure that we're all sort of like, you know, happy with what we're doing, not going too fast. Because I can get a bit carried away, I know. The good thing is when you're watching something online, you've got the ability to be able to turn it down to a different speed, which is good. So you can watch me going really slowly. Okay, so just bringing this black in over here, and I am going to lighten it back up again, but the reason I'm bringing the black in over the top again is sort of to sort of consolidate some of these areas, and to just bring a little bit more of that layering in, and also just to bring a tiny little bit of the fur detail in, so we don't lose it completely. We don't want a super smooth ear. We do want to have some detail and texture in there. You know, we just don't want that to be the be-all and end-all of the piece. coming in on the edge there. Again, sort of quite important. We can bring a little bit lighter colour in there as well, so we get an idea of those details. But you can see it's just that little bit too dark in there now. So the next thing I'm going to do is I just want to bring in, I'm going to use my putty eraser, and I just want to bring in this little line coming down here that's like it's like a bit of a looks like a little bit of a vein or something like that similar to what you'd find in a horse's ear. And we're just going to just very gently just sort of pull in a little bit of a line in there. So I'll use my putty eraser as something to give me texture, something to bring in highlights, that kind of thing. So very often I'll kind of, you know, put a couple of layers in that are quite dark, and then I'll use my putty eraser just to pull out a few little highlights. So I don't really use my erasers as an eraser to fix mistakes. I see my erasers as an opportunity for me to add in highlights and texture. And once you see your eraser as something that isn't something that corrects things, but it's something that actually adds something, you see it in a very different light. So for me, I of course I make mistakes, but I tend not to focus. If I've made a mistake, I tend not to focus on it at all. I just kind of work around it. I add to it. I come in over the top. I layer over the top of it, and I just incorporate whatever I've done into my drawing. And that's actually a really nice way to draw. Because you're not then sort of really worried about going wrong. So again, I'm just coming up here with the putty eraser. I'm just lifting a tiny weeny little bit of pigment out, so it's slightly lighter. And the putty eraser will also sort of do a little bit of work in the smoothing and blending area as well. And then I'm just going to a little bit up on the top here as well. It's quite nice when you've got these little bits of hair on the top that they just disappear into the background. I think we forget that there's a real connection between the surface that we're drawing on and the subject that we're drawing on the surface. There has to be a connection between the background and the surface. I tend to give my pieces a lot of breathing space, so I'll have quite a bit of white space around them. But I'll always try and connect my subject to the background. Even if I haven't got a background and it's just white pastel mat, I'll try and connect that surface to the subject, either with like a little lost edge, where your the edge just floats off into the background, or it could be having a very soft edge. So I want a nice soft edge here rather than any harshness. That the connection then is really lovely, so that to me is an important part of the composition and an important part of the process. Okay, so I'm just going to come down here and just lighten this off a little bit down here as well. Again, it's almost like a form of just blending. If you use it nice and gently, and then I'm going to use my dark sepia. And we're going to come in and we're going to add to where the black is. We're just going to bring a little bit of the detailing down here. So this is where we can start to bring a little bit of the fur lines in, but we don't want fur lines everywhere. We're going to bring them in places. And then I'm just going to bring a little bit of that through, and we need a little bit more, just a little bit more colour in here where it's very, very light. Going in there. Oops. Again, this is sort of, it takes a little bit of time just to get these values in the right places and working so that it actually looks like what it is that you're trying to draw. through there, very, very gently. You know, you might be picking up on some funny little marks on the pastel mat, and it's just, again, just ignore it if you can. It's coming down there. Gently, gently. Okay, I'm going to come back in with that. That's black dark sepia. Stick with the dark sepia. Let's just bring a few of these little hairlines in. When I'm bringing these little sort of shadowy hairlines in, I tend to go against the fur growth, and it's like you're taking your pencil up and underneath. So it's about getting your brain to understand what it is that it's looking at. And I find if I go up and under, I'm more likely to understand that what I'm drawing is a shadow, which really helps me, you know, sort of my brain comprehend what it is that I'm trying to do. Okay, so let's just bring a little bit more gently in there. And then this all gets darker as it comes down to this edge. Again, we want it to sort of have a bit of a dip in there so that we can see that there's a ridge there. So my pressure has never gone above medium. Mostly light, but then obviously I need to get it a little bit heavier to get the pigment sort of squashed down a little bit. But I've never used, or in this particular piece, I've never used really hard pressure. It's all, you know, sort of between light and medium. Like I say, you know, we're just drawing with grey here, so it's not the most interesting of colours, but actually you can create something amazing with just, you know, just these sort of more monochromatic colours. And grey is a very big factor when we're drawing animals. A lot of grey animals.
Sorry, I don't know that.
Oh, there's Alexa coming in there. Not sure why she's. I'm sure why she's listening in. She just pops up every now and again. Everybody else's will be going off now because I said her name. So again, we're just getting a little bit in there as well. Oh, I'm using dark sepia. Okay, just going in through there. I'm going to make that a little bit darker in a minute. I'll make some black in there. And then I want to bring some more of the paler colour in just to smooth it out a little bit more. And then we can start to work on this area here. So I'm going to come back to my warm grey 2. And we're just going to bring a little bit of this in here. Again, you can use a slightly harder pressure. Just to get everything sort of squashed down into the tooth. It's coming through there. Again, you know, we can use like a little brush or the cotton bud if you want to, but just be wary at this stage. If you're using something like a brush, that you don't kind of brush everything off. It will lighten it considerably. I'll show you in a second. That's not bad there at all. And then now what we can do is we can actually bring some marks that look like fur in as well, because we can you know, we're getting to the point now where we're sort of using the tooth. We're not using the tooth up. You can still get tons and tons of layers in there, But when we're bringing the colour in over the top, it's not necessarily picking up on the grain. It's more sort of, picking up on what's the pencil colour underneath. Okay, I'm going to bring a little bit more black in. And I'm just going to shade in here slightly. And we're just going to sort of poke it out a little bit at the sides so we get an idea that it's picking up on little stray hairs in there. And then just a few more, a little bit darker on the edge here. Again, looking at that graduation. When you're trying to make something look 3D, it's really important that you get that graduated shading in. Just get this a little bit darker down here again. So it's a lot of the time it's like you put something in and then you kind of obliterate it with another colour, and it feels like you're sort of going one step forward, two steps back, but it's definitely working. It's definitely part of the process because you're sort of smoothing and blending as you go, and it's all part of the layering process. Okay. Let's bring a little bit in there. Okay, so let's get this bit here finished. I'm just going to come into here and I'm just going to sharpen my black. I've got my Swordfish multi-point electric pencil sharpener that I have next to me on my desk, and it's my favourite pencil sharpener. I absolutely love it. And it just makes life much easier and quicker. Put that in there. So Vicky's just asked me the question. So this, I'm going to carry on with this as a tutorial, and this is going to be, this will be available in the membership. If anybody wants to, obviously, do the rest of it. Clearly, I'll have to finish it, so I've got to find the time to be able to finish it. So it's not like the whole thing is going to be there tomorrow. I've got to then go and finish it off, but. It's if you wanted to do it yourself, you can just use the techniques that we're using here to finish the piece off yourself, or hopefully it will be in the membership by the end of April, which will be good. I think it's quite a nice one to do actually, especially with all of that white fur coming down. I'm just going to bring a little bit of the black into here, and then I'm going to come back in with the light grey just to soften that. A bit of black in there. Just bringing that down there. That's the nice thing about pastel matte, is that you can get that light over dark really nicely and easily. I'm going to use the light grey, the Pablo light grey, and just putting that in there. And I can just come over the top of the black there, just smooth it all out. So if you've got some sort of fuzzy edges, you can use something like the cold grey one, the Pablo light grey. You can just use it to sort of smooth those edges out. It works really, really well. Pablos I really like. There's a few colours that I use on a regular basis. White, the Pablo white is one of my sort of staple colours. I don't really very often use the polychromos white. I find it's too difficult to get other colours in over the top. It's quite good for things like whiskers, if you were going to bring, whiskers in as a sort of like it almost indented. But if I was going to use white on this and then I wanted to draw back in over the top of it, bring some more layers in over the top of it, polychromos white is a tricky one for doing that. It kind of goes a bit weird and slidey. Okay, so I'm just going to come in here again, just to soften that off there. Just bring this, so you can see we've used a combination of the different warm and cool colours in here. Time are we on? And then let's just come and we'll work on this little area here. You could keep on working on this ear, just bringing a few more layers in, smoothing it out, maybe kind of enhancing those details a little bit more if you wanted. Just going to bring a little bit there on the edge. Okay. Right, so let's work on this little bit of the ear here. So I'm going to start with the cold grey 2. And what we're going to do is I want to kind of bring like a roll over the ear. I want to roll it over the ear here. So I'm just going to come up nice and gently. And then my pencil strokes are just going to be rounded. So we're going to get that kind of feeling that it's round. You don't want a flat. You don't want flat pencil strokes in here. They want to have a curve because we want to see that this is a curved edge of the ear here. So it's all curved around. All the way down here. That's good. And then I'm going to use that dark sepia, and we're just going to bring a little bit, again, curved around. Just going to sharpen that. So curving around. Now we don't feel you have to get everything absolutely perfect, exactly the same as the photograph. You really don't. For me, it's the look and feel. It's about getting an idea of what the animal I'm drawing looks like. So you want the character in there. You obviously want the eyes correct, but things like fur, it really doesn't matter if you sort of don't copy it bit for bit from the photograph. Unless you want to do. But for me, it's more about kind of getting the look and feel of whatever it is that I'm drawing. And that works well for me. Curly hair in particular, if you're trying to draw exactly what's on a photograph and you're trying to get every curl exactly the same as on a photograph, that actually might be what you love doing. Or you might think that's what you should be doing and you absolutely hate it. And again, you don't need to draw every single tiny little hair and follow the photograph exactly. It's just about making sure that what you're drawing looks like the subject. Right, okay, so I'm going to come in with that light grey. And we're going to come over the top of, and we're just going to push that darker colour that we've just put down. I'm going to push that into the lighter colour. So we're coming in and we're just going to sort of, that way everything becomes a little bit softer, everything becomes a little bit more blended into each other, and it doesn't just look like grainy pencil marks. Put a little bit more onto there. Okay, so now we've got this little bit in here. I'm just going to come back into the ear area. I'm just going to use my black, and I'm just going to come around the top. Not to make a big, strong outline around this bit of ear here, but to ensure that we've got some of these little fur bits that are a little bit darker and are in shadow coming down here. Okay, so what I don't want is a big dark line all the way down, but I do want to kind of have that that feeling that, you know, we've got stuff in shadow. Right, and then we can just use that dark sepia again, and we can start to bring in a little bit of this darker in the ear area here. So this is really dark in here. And actually we can just start to kind of bring in just a little bit, just and watching this fur here, very, very, very gently. Bring that darker a little bit in. So it's got a lot more detail in here. Let's just bring that little wriggly line in there. And then we can take a little bit more of that dark around there. And then we can also bring it's a little bit darker in there. We can see some pinky bits in here as well, and I'll bring some of that, we've got some of that beige red that we'll bring in here too. So I'm just gently bringing this around in here. Let's make that a little bit. Bring this in, and then I'm just going to dot a couple of areas out with the putty eraser, and we'll just fill those in with pink. But we can see a little bit of pink, but it's really not pink, it's a very dark pink. Okay, so I'm just going to come in here. Okay, so I'm just going to get the putty eraser, and we're just going to bring those little hairlines in there again. And then we're just going to start to bring these darker shadows into here as well. I just need to make that a bit wider, I think. This is the dark sepia that I'm still using. And then we just need to darken this edge. When you've got something that's very light and it's next to something that's very dark, you're going to get a very strong contrast. Also, when you've got something that's white, it's going to look bigger than if it was dark. And that's why quite a lot of the time when we do our drawings and we've got sort of light areas, they don't always look correct, and that's because we've got the values wrong, and we need to darken up the lights. Things like one of the biggest misconceptions, I think, is when drawing eyes, is that you've got to have bright white catch lights, and an awful lot of the time the bright white catch light is actually a real distraction, and you want something that is still lighter than the colours that are around it, but it doesn't necessarily mean catch lights don't necessarily have to be like a really bright white. They can be quite dark. And it's really, really important to start to understand your values. So how dark is something and how light is something. We're doing a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel in Art Club on a Tuesday at the moment, and we're going to start working on the white chest fur and neck fur on Tuesday. And what we're going to do first is I'm actually going to take it into Photoshop and we're going to discuss the values in there, because what looks white on the screen or on the paper or whatever actually is really, really not white. It's probably, an awful lot of places, it will be like a warm grey 4 or, you know, sort of like a dark pink or a dark blue. But because we see it, we know it's white fur, we see it as white, and then we misrepresent it when we draw it. And that's an awful lot of the reasons why some of our drawings don't always look how we want them to. It's because we haven't got the values quite right. And for me, that's a really, really important lesson. So we're going to be doing a little bit of Photoshop work first, just to determine what the values are, and then we're going to get into the drawing. And it's, you know, when you're drawing a white dog on white paper, an awful lot of the time when you start, if you get the correct values right from the start, you are so worried that it's going to be too dark. And then once you've got a load more information in, it's like, oh, you know, actually it's perfect, it's fine. But, you know, starting off a white dog with a dark blue is always going to be a bit scary. I'm just going to bring that in. I want to darken this, but with a cold grey, I think. Right, let's just go into here and just pull out a little bit there and a little bit there. And I'm going to use my beige red, which is the 132, a little bit of pink. And I'm just going to bring it into this ear area here, and then we're just going to get the greys over the top, those darker greys over the top. Pink and grey work really, really, really well. And you can see this is smoothing this out beautifully. It's making it really nice and smooth. So I'll just bring a little bit of that in. We don't have to go crazy. Just so we get a bit of a hint of something going on in there. And then we can use a little bit of the warm grey 4 over the top. Some of those more sort of colourful pigments, like the pinks and everything, when they lay down on the pastel mat, tend to be really, really nice and creamy. They tend to work really well. Right, so we'll come in with the black, and we're just going to just darken this up. We're going to go nice and dark. So we want a relatively sharp black, and we're going to work in tiny little pencil strokes. Using tiny pencil strokes and in like a round motion is going to enable you to fill the grain up without having to use really hard pressure. And it works really, really, really well. The only problem is if you've got a large area to do, it just gets a bit boring. Because you're just using tiny little pencil strokes. You can get a bit of an achy wrist from doing tiny pencil strokes, even though you're using light pressure, and it's because of that constant tiny, the same movement. So it's a good idea to have a rest and do some wrist exercises and stuff like that. Okay, so I'm just going to come down here, and we're just going to watch these little hairy bits here. So round and round and round. Don't worry, because we're working on pastel mat. Don't worry if you go, oh, I've made a mistake or whatever. We can come in over the top and we can layer over the top, no problem. I'm just going around here. Again, you know, I'm not going to go all out with trying to get all of the details and everything in this ear. I'm just going to randomly put some marks in, and as long as they're soft, the marks are soft, and as long as there's not a huge contrast between the light colours and the dark colours, it's just going to sit there and it's not going to attract any attention. And really, you don't really want this area of your portrait to be attracting all of the attention anyway. You want all of the attention to go into the face area and the eyes and stuff. So, you know, if you've got an area where you're thinking, oh, I'm not quite sure what's going on there, if you just make it a little bit sort of nondescript, a little bit sort of fuzzy, and ensure that you don't have any strong contrast in there. So you've got no bright light colour next to a dark colour. Then it'll be fine. Anywhere where there's a contrast, that's where people are going to focus their attention. So that's worked quite nicely. We know it's the sort of like the inside of the ear. We haven't had to spend loads and loads of time drawing in folds or anything like that because we can't see them. And then it's just got a little bit darker in there. So yeah, I've got bored now. We're not doing little tiny round pencil strokes. I've gone a bit crazy. But what we can do now is I can just bring a little bit more of that pink in over the top of the black, and it will just bring a little bit more of that colour in and also smooth and blend it out. Oh, Vicky's saying that lots of you want the eye from last week. That's absolutely fine. It is on. I don't think it's live on YouTube, but I think it is going to be live on YouTube at some point. But if you would like. The rest of, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to be sending you this link anyway. So I'm going to be forwarding you this link of what we've done today this afternoon. I will include the eye link in there as well. The colours are exactly the same. The line art is exactly the same. And obviously the reference photo is exactly the same. So I'll just include everything in one email for you. So if you've signed, which you have done, signed up, just keep an eye on your inbox probably an hour after this session, and I'll just pop both links in there for you. So you can just you just got to keep an eye on your spam folder, because I can't guarantee it's going to hit your actual inbox. So you just have to keep an eye on your spam, and if you've got any other folders as well. I've got like social media folders and promotional folders for some reason in Gmail. So just keep a bit of an eye on those, and I'll send them through to you. But if you could try not to email in and ask for it if you haven't received it straight away. I've just got to have a chance for the video to render and save from YouTube, and then actually do the work. So you should get to hear from me. And we've also got there's quite a few people who've been trying it out. I've got a help function on my website now, and. Do you know, I really like it. I hope other people like it. But basically, if you ask me a question, you get a video response back from me. So it's like, oh, hi Bonny, can you send me a link to the dog's eye? And you'll get me on a video going, oh, hi Sandra, yes, of course, I'll email it to you. And it's actually me live talking to you. And I'd been swimming this morning, and somebody was couldn't log in on their iPad. And they were like, oh, I'm really struggling to log in on my iPad, blah, blah, blah. So they had me talking to them just coming out of the swimming pool. Well, I hadn't just come out of the swimming pool. I'd got all my clothes on and I was walking out to my car. So I wasn't in the pool. Yeah, and I really, really like it because it... And then some people have videoed me back, which is lovely. So I get to see people and hear them talk and everything. I really like it. You don't have to video back. You can just use text. But it just makes it all that more personal. And actually, it's quicker for me to do that than to email, unless I've got to send a link or something like that. If it's just a quick, oh yes, this is what you need to do, I really, really like it. I really like it. So saying that, I'm going to have loads of people now messaging me going, hi Bonny. I just think it's really nice. So, right. Okay, so this is really nice and dark here. I'm just going to use This is a little brush I'm using. So this is it doesn't matter at all what it is. This is a brush that I bought to do oil painting, and it's a Filbert 0, and it's just a really nice soft little brush. You've got to be really careful when you use a brush on pastel mat because it does move everything around. But what I want to do is I just want to soften here. I want it to look nice and soft. So I'm just going to soften this edge which is where, when I come to finish the piece, I'm going to bring the grey in. And then I'm just going to use my putty eraser just to clean it up a little bit. Another really, really good thing to get into the habit of doing when you're working on white pastel mat, again, I use my putty eraser. Every sort of half an hour or so, I will go over my surface. Make sure you've got a clean eraser. Oh my goodness, you know, if you've been rubbing out something that's green, and then you go and use it all over you, you're going to be really sad. So make sure it's nice and clean. And then I'll just come round my white pastel mat, and I'll just dab all round it. You can't see me at the minute, but I'll just dab all the way round it. And that gets rid of any little dusty bits or anything like that. And I'll do that on a regular basis. And my pastel mat tends to stay pretty pristine. And I've got dogs in my studio. It's really dusty in here. You know, and I still manage to keep my pastel mat really, really nice and clean. Right, okay, what have we got? We've got sort of a quarter of an hour left. I'm going to come back in with the black a little bit. Let's just tidy up some of these edges. I'm really happy to answer any questions that anybody's got on anything. This is, so if you're going to do tutorials with me live, so if you know, say you join me tomorrow in the membership, and this is the kind of thing you can expect in things like art club. You know, I'm sitting here, I'll talk you through everything. When it comes to tutorials, they tend to be slightly more, I guess slightly slower, and I'll take my time on, I'll take a little bit more time on areas, purely because when you're teaching live, you know, you don't want people to get, you don't want to be spending 3 hours on this area here. Not that I would spend 3 hours on that, but do you know what I mean? With a tutorial, I have got more scope to be able to go a little bit more into areas and make them maybe a little bit more sort of finished, if you like, a little bit more refined in areas. Just because I've obviously got the time and it's, you know, it's kind of a recorded video, but I don't miss anything out. So I don't fast forward anything. I don't put anything on, you know, speed it up or anything like that. You get everything. And the other really good thing as well, I think, when you record live, when you're drawing, whoever's listening to the recording, you also get to hear the thought processes that go on in the artist's head. So I could have almost like a little bit of a conversation with myself, and I go, right, okay, so we're going to use this colour, and then I go, oh no, hang on a second, if I use that colour, this might happen. So actually, let's use this colour instead. So you get all of those little extra bits in there, and I think, I mean, there's an awful lot of very, very good art teachers, whether they're watercolour, pastel, you know, colour pencil, whatever, and you do get a lot who do the live voiceover, but you also get a lot who do the drawing, and I completely understand why they do this. So they do the drawing, they have a lovely time doing the drawing. They don't have to speak or do anything when they're doing the drawing, and then they edit the drawing, and that's when they put all of the voice bits in and tell you what's going on. And it works, which is fine, but for me, I want you to have everything. I want you to be feeling what I'm feeling when I'm drawing and thinking what I'm thinking when I'm drawing. And you wouldn't get that if I did my voiceover afterwards, because I'll have forgotten. I can't remember my name half of the time. You know, I've completely forgotten. Right, this is the warm grey here. I'm just bringing the warm grey in over the top of my this bit here. I had a very interesting conversation on a podcast last week with a voice coach. She's American, but she lives in Sydney. And I was saying, I have this thing where my voice kind of clams up and I go a little bit croaky sometimes when I'm talking. And she was talking about being out of my head and actually breathing properly and all of that kind of thing. So I can feel my voice sort of croaking now. And it was really, really interesting what she was saying. I need to look into it a little bit more. For somebody who talks an awful lot, I've obviously got to look after my voice, but a very interesting lady. Okay, so I'm just coming down here. And then I want to bring I think I'm going to bring a little bit more light into this ear. Now, so in my head now, I'm thinking, oh, I'll use a little bit of white. But what happens when you use white over the top of other colours? It can go a little bit smeary, but let's. Oh no, I tell you what I'm going to use. If you haven't got it, use a warm grey too. But if you have got it, use a Pablo Ash Grey. It's quite similar. Oops, it's quite similar. But it's quite a nice little pencil for just adding just tiny little sort of little furry marks. So I'm not going crazy with the fur marks, but I just want to get it slightly smoother. So the pressure I'm using is very light. Don't have to use hard pressure at all. And in fact, if you did use hard pressure with your lighter colour over the top of the dark, you're more likely to get that sort of smeary, muddy colour. Whereas if you use light pressure and a sharp pencil, you are going to end up with a more clean colour. This here looks really quite nice now. I'm sure, like me, you were having doubts at the beginning, thinking, oh my lord, this is looking dreadful and grainy and horrible. And we have those thoughts in our heads all of the time, and we have to just bat them away. We can't allow those negative thoughts to infiltrate our heads all of the time. We've just got to get rid of them. I've done an awful lot of work on myself, an awful lot of work. And, to the point now where sometimes I can't, but sometimes I can just take a deep breath and shrug stuff off. Sometimes it takes a little bit more work to kind of shrug stuff off. But it's certainly with my inner voice actually is quite kind. I am quite kind to myself. Either that or I'm completely disillusioned, or whatever the word is. But I think my inner voice is quite kind to myself, which is good. I've even got, would you believe, my son bought me some socks for Christmas, and God, we're nearly Easter, aren't we? How crazy is that? But he bought me some socks for Christmas, and they've got sayings on them, and my socks today say, what do they say? Pretty kind, I think. I had some on the other day, some red ones that were pretty powerful. The ones today, they're pretty kind, so that's good. That orange, well, the black with orange bits on them. And inevitably, once they go in the wash, they'll come back out. I'll lose one of the pair, and then I'll be wearing I always wear odd socks. The Dora, the puppy, she's always pinching socks. Okay, so put that in there. And then I'm just going to go a little bit lighter down here. So I hope you've enjoyed it. Drawing fur is, I love it. I know it can feel a little bit frustrating at times. However, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's putting the time in, putting the practice in. If you've got the want to do it, you will find the time. We've all got 24 hours in the day, and you will find the time to do it. There's one of my members. She's just had a 3-page spread in the Anne Kohlberg magazine. I mean, it's a big magazine, and her drawings are utterly brilliant. And, she gets up in the middle of the night to draw. I'm not saying you have to get up in the middle of the night, but that's, I want to draw, I need to draw, I want to develop, I'm really, really passionate about this. I am going to put the hours in. And if you are really, really passionate, about it, and you will find the time. You will find the time to do it. You'll prioritise it. You'll put your drawing time over anything else. I mean, look at me. Stopped ironing. Stopped feeding my children. Taught them how to cook. And now, my 3 are a little bit older now, but they all still live at home. But they all cook for themselves. They all do their own washing. because I've taught them well. I'm like, no, I'm just doing drawing. You know, but finding time, it really is a priority. You know, if you want to make a, I mean, even with a hobby, you know, I'm saying even with a hobby, that's how I started, and it's still, drawing is still a hobby for me. You know, and I prioritise my time for drawing. It's the biggest priority I've got. Because I know how wonderful it makes me feel. Right, I'm just going to pop back in again with we've got 5 minutes with the dark sepia. I'm just going to sharpen it up. Oops. And I'm just going to bring a little bit more up into here. Oops. I'm going out for Sunday lunch as well tonight, this evening, which is very nice. So we've got Sunday lunch, well, Sunday tea, and then Maisie and I are watching Matilda the musical, apparently. She's texted me this morning and she said that's what we're doing, so that's what we're doing. And I've had a lovely morning swimming and in the sauna, which is really nice. So, oops. In the cold pool, oh my goodness, I absolutely love that cold pool. I'm quite glad that they do heat it to, I think it's about 10 degrees they heat it to, 10 or 11 degrees, so it's still really cold, but it's not crazy cold. But oh goodness, it's amazing. If you've got like when you wake up in the morning, you've got like a thick head, and you know, it's all a bit sort of foggy, the cold water just gets shot at it all. It's amazing. So can you see now what we're doing? We've got all of those lovely layers in, so now we can get all of these little, if you want to put all of the tiny details in now, you've got the ability to get so much detail, tiny details, sharp lines, all because we've put the work in to get those sort of nice little base layers and everything in there. Works really, really, really well. And we've created something really pretty that's grey. You know, that's a plus in my book. So I hope you have enjoyed it. You know, I hope this time has given you some ideas that you can, you know, either carry on drawing this little guy, you know, yourself and finishing it. And I'd love to see, you know, I'd love to see the finished piece or the works in progress. You know, and just understanding pastel mat a little bit more, understanding the layering process a little bit more. You know, and understanding that there is a process, and it's really important to go through the process and to really enjoy the process. I think that's really, really key as well. And then if you did want to come and join me in my in the membership, I mean, obviously I'm going to say it's amazing. It is amazing. And what makes it amazing, what makes it really, really amazing, is the people that's in it. Fantastic members, amazing community, you know, and we do fun things and we learn, and I'm just one of those people that just want to share everything with you. Whether you like it or not, you're going to get it. So I hope you've enjoyed what we've been doing today. I've loved it. I've absolutely loved it. I always love drawing and teaching and what have you. So have a very lovely rest of your Sunday, whether it's very early in the morning still for you, or it could actually be a Monday, couldn't it, if you're in Australia? But have a really, really lovely rest of your Sunday, and hopefully we'll see some of you joining me tomorrow to open at 12 o'clock in the afternoon UK time. You know, it'd be really nice to see some more lovely faces in the community, and I just want to thank you all so much for joining me and for drawing with me, and for making my Sunday really special. So thank you all so much, and I will see you all very soon. Okay, bye.